We'll move to question time. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, it's been revealed that the Albanese government is now presiding over the longest household recession in recorded Australian history. 1 year into the Albanese government, GDP per capita began going backwards and has continued to do so for the past 6 quarters, in a trend that exceeds any period in the past 50 years and one which economists agree will likely continue. There are warning signs all across the economy. Business insolvencies are breaking GFC records, productivity is stagnating, and now this new analysis shows a 1.6% fall in GDP per capita since December 2022, with real disposable incomes crashing by 9% since March 2022. Only a few months ago, the Prime Minister was posting memes describing the government's budget as so good. Don't these figures demonstrate that Labor's self-congratulatory rhetoric is not only unwelcome but untrue, and your economic management is far from so good?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. I thank you for the question and take the interjection from Senator Ayres. It's good that it's a question on the economy, because that's certainly what we are focused on. That's what we are focused on. And that is why you have seen, under this government, a focus on making sure we get wages moving again, a focus on making sure we deliver assistance to households and to families and to small businesses for energy. It's why we are focused on strengthening Medicare, and it's why we are focused on doing what we can to help Australians with their cost of living challenges. Now, we understand people are doing it tough. People are finding it hard to make ends meet. People are finding it hard to pay bills, which is why we, on this side, supported increases in wages. And I remember being in this chamber and listening to Senator Cash and Senator Hume tell everybody why wage rises were the worst possible thing. That's right. The worst possible thing. And I think we know throughout Australia which party is the party that supports higher wages, which party is the party that supports increases to the minimum wage, which party is the party that thinks that low wages are good for the economy. And so, Senator Birmingham, you can come in here and talk about the situation that Australians are facing, but you should be upfront with them that you actually want them to earn less. You actually want them to earn less. The Liberal, the coalition policy prescription is to make sure people work harder and earn less. Yeah, that is what the Liberal policy prescription is, and they should be upfront about that. And the Liberal policy prescription is also in relation to higher energy costs that the government should not provide assistance. That is the Liberal and Mr Dutton's policy position.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Given this household recession that started under your government is the worst experienced in our lifetimes, what mistakes does the Albanese government take responsibility for in driving Australia into recession?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Wong.
Well, first, the only party that is cheering and barracking for Australia to go into recession are those opposite. Working people don't want a recession. Small business doesn't want a recession. Big business doesn't want a recession. Consumers don't want a recession. But I tell you what, the coalition sure does, don't they? They're in here barracking for a recession as hard as they can. But what I'm asked about taking responsibility. Of course, we take responsibility for the economic management. Of course we do. We take responsibility for doing what we can as a government every single day to try and ensure we do what we can to assist Australians with the cost of living. This is what this government does. We continue to try and work to provide assistance to Australians, to provide bulk billing, to strengthen Medicare, to lift wages, and to fight inflation.
Thank you, Minister. The time for responding
do.
has expired. Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
Well, President, last year the Prime Minister stated that as Prime Minister I always take responsibility for the decisions I have taken, and in 2022 he famously proclaimed that I won't blame someone else, I'll accept responsibility. Minister, what responsibility in terms of policies and how they are failing Australians and driving Australia deeper into a household recession, the longest on record, does the Prime Minister take, and what is he going to do to get Australians out of this record-long household recession?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Wong.
Well, the first thing is we were going to keep working to lift wages, unlike you. Unlike you. We'll keep working to bring down costs, unlike you. Unlike you. We'll keep working to strengthen Medicare, unlike you. Unlike you. And we will keep building more homes, unlike you and unlike you. That is what we will do. And what I would say to those opposite who come in here and talk about cost of living, you should be upfront with the Australian people and look them in the eye and say, we want you to earn less, because that is your policy. We want you to earn less. We know out of the mouths of the Shadow Finance Minister a wage rise would be absolutely the wrong thing to do. That's what she said. I mean, the reality is there is one party that is advocating for increasing wages, that is advocating and delivering more bulk billing, that is working on more houses for Australia, and that is not saying we will cut the budget. You, on those opposite, want lower wages.
Minister Wong.
Lower wages.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senators, it is not okay to yell louder than the minister, who has her microphone on. Senator Stewart.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Housing and Homelessness, Senator Farrell. Australians are doing it tough right now, and housing is a big part of that story. After a decade of neglect from the Liberals and Nationals, Australians are facing long queues for rentals and enormous first home deposits. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to get more Australians into home ownership through the Help to Buy scheme, including in my home state of Victoria?
Great question.
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Stewart, for that question and the great work that you do for the people of Victoria. And I know that thousands of people in Victoria who stand to benefit from the Help to Buy scheme will be keen to hear the answer to this question. For 40,000 people across Australia, a door to home ownership has opened today. If you're a low or middle-income Australian looking to get into home ownership, the help it does. It's going to help to buy scheme will give you that opportunity. We've got a generation of low and middle-income young people who are stuck in rent traps. They're angry, they're frustrated, they feel genuine despair that home ownership may never happen for them. They've seen the dream of home ownership slip away from their grasp. Our Help to Buy legislation will help change this. With legislation up from the government, Help to Buy means a smaller mortgage and a smaller deposit, and to help eligible Aussies get onto the housing ladder. This is the kind of work that will only ever be delivered by good Labor governments. Because only Labor has an ambitious, extensive agenda when it comes to housing, make it easier to build, to rent and to buy. Because after a decade of neglect in the housing by the Liberals and the Nationals, they've abandoned the idea that working people should be ever able to own their own home. Only Labor will help more Australians into home ownership.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Stewart, first supplementary.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Minister, for that response. In government, the Liberals and Nationals vacated the housing policy space for a decade, not even having a housing minister for most of that time. How is the Albanese Labor government working to put home ownership back within reach for Australians, and what is standing in the way?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thanks, Senator Stewart, for her first supplementary.
Minister Farrell, I'm sorry. Please resume your seat. Order. Minister Farrell, please continue.
Well, thank you, Senator Stewart. And I think you've hit the nail on the head here, and the reaction by those opposite, I think shows that. And the senator knows, as well as anyone else, that there is no silver bullet, unfortunately, to the housing crisis. This problem has been 30 years in the making and made worse, Senator Cash, by the Liberals and the Nationals, who spent their time on the front benches twiddling their thumbs on an issue they determined to be a little tricky. They had no housing minister, they had no ambition, and worst of all, they had no plan for home ownership. The result is that Australia has been left with a housing shortage, and that's why the Albanese Labor government has a housing plan investing $32 billion to build 1.2 million new homes.
Has expired. Senator Stewart, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Today, the Albanese Labor government secured passage of the Help to Buy bill in the Senate. What does this mean for tens of thousands of Australians, including cleaners, early educators and aged care workers, who might finally now be able to realise the dream of owning their own home?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Stewart for her second supplementary question. And this bill has been before the parliament for far too long. But we welcome the support that this bill has now received from the crossbench. This is delivering hope to thousands of Australians, and it means security and stability. It means the ability to put down roots and to take those big life decisions, such as whether to start a family. This Labor government is turning promises into progress, delivering every day, delivering for every generation, delivering for every Australian. The Liberals just get in the way. Being arrogant gets you nowhere. Being reckless builds nothing. It's the Labor government that gets things done.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, having spent months patting yourselves on the back and giving yourselves credit for the last 2 budget surpluses, what responsibility does the Albanese government—
Senator Hume, please resume your seat. Order on my right. Order, Senator Ayres. Senator Birmingham. Senator Gallagher. I remind senators, Senator Hume is entitled to put her question with silence from the chamber. Please continue, Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, having spent months patting yourselves on the back and giving yourselves credit for the last 2 budget surpluses, what responsibility does the Albanese government take for the reported record deterioration in government finances, the largest worsening of a budget outside a war or a pandemic? Or does Prime Minister Albanese only want to claim other people's successes while blaming others for his economic failures?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Hume, for the question. And Senator, we always take responsibility. We take responsibility for making sure we work to deliver higher wages. We take responsibility for making sure we work to deliver more bulk billing and more urgent care clinics. We take responsibility for making sure we get our housing support through the parliament. We take responsibility for making sure we properly fund infrastructure, we properly fund aged care, we properly fund health. These are all the things this government takes responsibility for. Now, I'd make the point, Senator. Obviously, these are not the government's numbers. These are numbers that will be updated in the usual way in the upcoming mid-year budget. But I would say that the Treasurer and the Finance Minister have been saying for some time that pressures on the budget are building, not easing. We've been upfront about that. Senator Gallagher has made that clear. This report that you referenced shows that global economic uncertainty, like the slowdown in China, is a key factor weighing heavily on the budget right now. But I would say, Senator Hume, and you are one of the people I referenced in response to the last answer. It wasn't that long ago that you talked about the fact that real wage increases would be the worst thing for Australians. I'll repeat that. Senator Jane Hume claimed real wage increases would be the worst thing for Australians. And what I would say to you, Senator Hume, is we don't actually agree with your economic prescription. We don't actually agree with your economic prescription. They're your words, Senator. You take. Will you take responsibility for your words, Senator? You asked me if we take responsibility for our decisions, and we do. Will you take responsibility for your words and your policy?
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Minister, independent estimates are that this deterioration—
Senator Hume, please resume your seat. Order across the chamber. Senator Hume, I'm going to invite you to begin again, and I'll ask that clock be reset, and I expect there to be silence.
Madam President, Minister, independent estimates are that this deterioration represents a $49.3 billion hit to the budget bottom line. This is the largest nominal contraction in the underlying cash balance on record outside of the pandemic. Will the Albanese government rule out making this budget blowout worse through ever-increasing bigger spending promises?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Wong.
Well, Senator, I know that your policy is to cut $315 billion from the budget.
Order.
But we don't take the view that at a time when Australians are struggling, that what we should be doing is cutting health. We don't take the view that what we should be doing is putting downward pressure on wages. We don't take the view that we should be saying, no, we won't fund urgent care clinics. The problem is, Senator Hume, your policy prescription will do nothing other than make things harder for everyday Australians. That is the reality. Your policy prescription, Senator Hume, would make things harder.
Please resume your seat. I'm surprised, Senator Hume. I demanded there be silence when you asked your question. I invited you to re-put your question, and I restated the clock. I've called your side to order, and you in particular, and you've continued that interjection. That's rude and disorderly, and I expect you to listen in silence. Thank you. And Senator McGrath. Minister Wong.
Thank you. There is no doubt about two things. First is the budget position that we inherited had hundreds of billions, deficits of 6 years of worth more than $300 billion, an average deficit of $50 billion. And under this government, we turned two of those big Liberal deficits into two substantial surpluses. The other truth is you want wages to be low.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Economist Chris Richardson stated of Australia that we have not had good luck. Sorry, we have not had good management, we have had good luck, and good luck is temporary. Haven't economists like Mr Richardson been right all along when they've called out Labor's record spending and productivity-destroying red tape and regulations for both weakening the economy while keeping inflation and interest rates higher for longer?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Wong.
I have another quote from Deloitte which is of interest. The government still deserves credit. Most of the unexpected revenue which has flowed into federal coffers over the past 2 years has been saved rather than spent, and that has required fiscal discipline. You don't like that quote. You don't like my quote of you. You don't like this quote.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. I will come to you, Senator Hume. I want there to be order across the chamber. Senator Hume.
Point of order, Madam President, on relevance. I quoted Mr Richardson, not Deloitte. Just quoting somebody randomly back to me isn't appropriate. If I could draw you back to the purpose of the question.
Thank you, Senator Hume. The minister is being relevant, and I'll ask her to continue.
Yeah. Well, I'll certainly give you another quote, Senator Hume. Senator Jane Hume claimed real wage increases would be the worst thing for Australians, and I'll add this: adding more rights for workers, is something that is just part of a normal working relationship is unreasonable. More rights for workers is unreasonable.
Minister Wong. Minister Wong. Senator Watt. Yes, I'm just wanting there to be— Senator Hume, I haven't called you yet. I'm trying to get order in the chamber. Senator Hume.
On relevance, Madam President, I quoted Mr Richardson. I didn't ask for a quote on my— and if you are going to quote me, please do so accurately. Don't just make stuff up.
Resume your seat. Order. Your question went to broad economics. That is what the minister is responding to. Minister Wong, please continue.
Well, Senator Hume, what I'd say to the opposition again—
Order.
Oh, man.
Order. Minister Wong, please continue.
Senator Hume, through you, President, what I'd say to Senator Hume and the opposition, if their version of good decision-making is $315 billion worth of cuts out of the federal budget, if their version of good decision-making is not giving every Australian a tax cut, if their version of good decision-making is to oppose wage increases, then I think.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, President. My question is to Minister Wong. In issuing arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defence minister, the International Criminal Court noted that each bears criminal responsibility for the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution and other inhumane acts. Countries around the world have indicated they would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he sets foot in their territory, in compliance with this arrest warrant. These countries include Canada, the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Ireland, Switzerland, Slovenia, Spain and Portugal, many of which are countries you often refer to as like-minded. Minister, will you join these like-minded countries and explicitly say here today that authorities here will arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he dares set foot on this land?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Wong.
Through you, President, I answered almost precisely the same question, but from the other perspective, asked by the Shadow Attorney General yesterday,
Senator Cash.
and I would refer you, Senator Faruqi, to that answer.
Senator Faruqi, first supplementary.
Minister, I didn't ask for more weasel words. Weasel words, you saying respecting International Criminal Court and adherence to international law. I asked if you were going to comply with your obligations under international law and commit to arresting Benjamin Netanyahu in compliance with the ICC arrest warrant.
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Wong.
I answered precisely that question yesterday. I refer you to that answer, Senator.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Faruqi, second supplementary.
You just can't get yourself to say that you will arrest Benjamin Netanyahu or anything to support Palestinians. The ICC arrest warrants come on top of the UN recent special committee finding that Israel's methods in Gaza are consistent with genocide, as well as an International Court of Justice finding that Israel is responsible for apartheid in the occupied Palestinian territories. Minister, since you are such a self-proclaimed supporter of international law, why won't you impose sanctions on the genocidal apartheid state of Israel?
Faruqi. Minister Wong.
Senator, I know that you like to make this personal, but this isn't actually about me. Yes, I am the Foreign Minister, and my support for international law, it is a personal belief, but it is also a belief that this country, as a middle power, has an interest in international law and the international legal framework being observed. And that is why we have taken the position we have in relation to what has occurred in Gaza. It is why we talk about and join with others in relation to expressing a view on the application of international humanitarian law. It is why I'm working with other countries to lead an initiative internationally for the protection of aid workers. It is consistent with Australia's position, for example, in the South China Sea.
Thank you, Minister. The time for responding has expired. Senator Marielle Smith.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. The Albanese Labor government's economic plan is all about helping people with their cost of living whilst fighting inflation. We're working hard to bring costs down for households, push wages up and get inflation back where it should be. The Minister and the Treasurer have been taking measures to repair and reform the economy to achieve these objectives for all Australians. What steps has the government taken to support the economy after a decade of neglect under the Liberals and Nationals?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President, and I thank Senator Smith for that excellent question. And I can update the chamber on all of the steps we've been taking to get the budget in much better shape, to make sure that we can invest in those key essential services that Australians value, like Medicare and aged care and the NDIS. And we wanted to make sure, when we came to government, that we were dealing with all of the problems we inherited. So we had falling living standards, interest rates were increasing, inflation was going through the roof. Well, let's just remember your record. Let's just remember your record. 10 years of failing to deal with any of the big policy challenges like energy. Remember that, Senator Birmingham? How many policies was there? 22 from memory, and haven't landed one of them, and there could be 23. We could be dealing with 23 now that they've all gone quiet about on their nuclear policy. But we have found $80 billion in savings. We've delivered 2 surpluses, which I know is particularly important for Senator Hume. 2 surpluses to the former government's zero surpluses. We've delivered bigger tax cuts, cheaper childcare, energy bill rebates, student debt relief. Student debt relief. Now, there's something that you never ever dealt with in government. Fee-free TAFE. Who possibly could vote against people getting access to training without having to pay for it? Who possibly could? Someone in this room does. You. You oppose it, unbelievably. More bulk billed GP appointments, cheaper medicines, again. Who in this place could vote against cheaper medicines? We'll have a look around, and yes, it's you, again. Cheaper medicines.
Minister Gallagher, please
Senator
resume your seat. Senator Henderson.
Of order, Madam President. Just asking if the minister could direct her comments through the chair.
I think the minister is directing her comments through the chair, Senator Henderson. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. The largest increase to rent assistance in 30 years and the largest investment in social and affordable housing in more than a decade, because those opposite don't believe in social housing.
Expired. Senator Smith, first supplementary.
The Albanese Labor government will deliver the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook towards the end of the year, outlining the state of the budget. What has the government done to respond to spending pressures and deliver cost-of-living relief in the budget?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Smith for the supplementary. Well, the Treasurer and I have made no secret since coming to government that pressure is building on the budget in a number of areas, primarily in areas like NDIS, aged care, defence and servicing the debt that we inherited, almost $1 trillion in debt. These are the big areas of pressure in the budget. Now, we're dealing with some of them, like we've got some reforms done with NDIS. We've got the big aged care bill through last week, so we are managing a couple of those big areas of pressure, but there's still more work to do. And I would say, for those opposite that always complain about spending in the budget, the biggest movement in the budget this year, $6.5 billion, was an increase in veterans' compensation payments. And why was that? Because we actually staffed the Department of Veterans Affairs so they could process the veterans' entitlements and deal with the backlog we inherited from those opposite. And were you seriously talking about cutting that?
The time for answering has expired. Senator Marielle Smith, second supplementary.
Thank you, President.
Order. Order. Please continue, Senator Smith.
Budgets are about choices, and the Albanese Labor government has delivered for all Australians whilst also taking decisions to improve the budget bottom line. How does the government's approach to economic and fiscal management compare to previous approaches?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Smith for that question, because it is relevant to have a look at what happened between us and what happened when they were last in power. They always measure our performance. Well, let's have a little look at theirs. Inflation was up, wages were down, jobs were sluggish, productivity was the worst in 40 years, business investment declined, and the budget was in deficit to the tune of $78 billion. And what have we done? Well, inflation is almost halved, had a 6 in front of it, now has a 2 in front of it. Annual real wages are growing. More than 1 million jobs created, 1 million people in jobs, more than when we came to government. We've reversed the decline in productivity. Business investment had grown. 2 back-to-back surpluses, something you were unable to do. And this, for the $1 trillion of debt we inherited, is now $149 billion less because of the way we have managed the budget.
Thank you, Minister. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Minister Gallagher. Minister, in September the Prime Minister said, and I'll quote him, "We are doing everything we can to ensure Australians are paying a fair price at the checkout and Australian farmers are getting a fair price for their goods." The Prime Minister committed to introducing legislation for a mandatory food and grocery code this year. With 3 sitting days left for the year, why hasn't the government introduced this legislation?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, and I thank Senator Pocock for the question. We have, as everyone in the Senate will know, an extremely busy legislation program. We have a number of bills in here in the Senate that we are seeking to progress, and if there was a willingness to do that, we would sincerely appreciate it. If there is more, I can come back to Senator Pocock on the trajectory for that legislation. I will. We are serious about making sure that people get a fair deal at the supermarkets. I think everyone has been feeling this. Anyone who does the shopping sees it every day when they go to the supermarket, and wanting to make sure that they get a better deal and make sure that the supermarkets are doing the right thing by people, I think is a priority for all of us in this place. We have responded to the review, the Emerson review, which talked about making a code of conduct for supermarkets mandatory, and that is being progressed. I don't have the exact date of when that will be, but I will see if I can provide it during this question time.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Minister. I'm certainly hearing concerns from Australians that they feel like they're getting fleeced every time they go through the checkout, and we have this firm commitment from the Prime Minister of Australia that the mandatory grocery code will be introduced this year, 2.5 days left this year. Can I ask the government if we will in fact see that, or if this is not going to happen?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I've taken that element of Senator Pocock's first question on notice, and I will come back with any information that I can provide. The Prime Minister has been dealing with this issue for some months. He's very keen to make sure that we are doing whatever we can to make sure shoppers are getting a fair deal at the supermarket. So you've already seen the investments we've given to the ACCC to make sure that they crack down on market conduct, including misleading and deceptive pricing practices, and we've seen some of the results of that with the work that the ACCC is taking through the courts. We have done the work on a new mandatory food and grocery code, as you have outlined, and we will legislate to enact multi-million-dollar penalties. We've worked with the states and territories on planning and zoning for supermarkets. We're also looking at what further can be done on shrinkflation, where customers are charged the same for less. ACCC will be doing their inquiry into supermarkets, and we've given the ACCC stronger powers to scrutinise mergers, which is legislation before this place, and hopefully we can pass
Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, you mentioned the legislative agenda before the Senate. Why is the government prioritising electoral reform that gives more money to the major parties ahead of actually looking after Australians when they shop at Coles or Woolies? Rather than deal with that, you're looking to entrench the Coles and Woolworths of Australian politics.
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
I don't accept your analysis of the electoral reform, but I would also say that I've outlined a lot of things we're doing on supermarkets to make sure consumers are getting a better deal that doesn't require legislation. And in response to your question about legislation, we have legislation before the parliament that deals with a future made in Australia. We've got a whole raft of legislation around Treasury bills. We've got a whole raft of legislation about the universities accord and lowering HECS debt. Yep, I know, Senator Henderson. We know you don't like university students or TAFE students. We know you want them to pay more. We've got legislation before the parliament in a whole range of areas, in midwives, in school
Gallagher,
funding.
please resume your seat. Senator Wong.
Point of order, Chair. Senator Henderson demanded that the minister speak through you because she didn't like someone talking at her, and now she's interjecting without drawing breath. So, you know,
thank you, Minister Wong. I have called you, Senator Henderson. I've called the Senate to order, and I've called Senator Henderson. I've called Senator Henderson. I've called you. Order. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. And Senator Pocock, just to come back on your further question, regulations to make the new mandatory food and grocery code of conduct will be made this year.
Minister Gallagher, please resume your seat. Minister Wong.
Withdraw that.
She
just swore at the minister. She has to withdraw it. Oh, you don't think it's a swear word? Okay,
Minister Wong. Minister Wong, please. Minister Wong. Minister Wong, I intend to deal with the matter if you resume your seat. Order. Senator Henderson, I didn't. Order. Senator Henderson, I didn't hear your remarks, but I am inviting you, if you did make a remark, to please withdraw it in the interest of the chamber.
Just a point of order. The minister was impugning motive.
Senator Henderson, that is not a point of order. Senator Henderson, resume your seat. Senator Henderson, resume your seat. Order. I'll say it again, Senator Henderson. That Minister Wong has stood on a point of order. I've asked you to withdraw. I've also indicated to you that I did not hear the comment, but in the interest of the chamber, I'm asking you to withdraw.
Madam President, I withdraw.
Thank you. Minister Gallagher.
Oh, such paddock language. I'm shocked. The regulations to make the new mandatory food and grocery conduct will be made this year, with the code commencing into force from the 1st of April 2025. So
thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell.
Thank you, President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Senator McCarthy. In July this year, the mayors of King Island and Flinders—
Senator Wong and I think Senator Ruston. I'm having trouble hearing Senator Tyrrell. Senator Tyrrell, I'm going to ask for the clock to be reset and for you to be able to start your question again.
Thank you, President.
Please begin again.
My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Senator McCarthy. In July this year, the mayors of King Island and Flinders Island came to Canberra to lobby Labor for a review of the Tasmanian Freight Equalisation Scheme. Residents on both islands are paying through the nose for groceries and farmers are on the brink. This is because of high freight costs and a scheme that hasn't been updated in decades. Labor members promised the mayors that a review of the scheme specifically for the islands would take place. Minister, can you tell me what's happening with this review?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Tyrrell for the question. In terms of that particular review, Senator Tyrrell, I will need to seek some further advice to see where that is up to. But I am conscious that when all the mayors came here, Madam President, in June, July this year, it was really good to have the mayors, especially those from Tasmania, here to see us, but even the mayors from right across Australia. And I'd like to certainly remind the Senate that it is this government, the Labor government, that actually invited local government back to Canberra. For 10 years we did not see the local government represented here, and it was the Albanese Labor government, that brought the third tier of the democratic system of Australia back to this parliament. So I think it's an important question by Senator Tyrrell. And in fact, like all things that we're doing for Tasmania, Madam President, and I just wanted to add this to Senator Tyrrell's questions, we are saving Tasmanians over $24.6 million, thanks to Labor's cheaper medicines, including over $5.4 million saved in Braddon alone. And we're delivering free TAFE. 3,255 Tasmanian students enrolled in a fee-free TAFE place in 2023 alone. I mean, don't you want to hear about Tasmania, Senator Duniam? I thought, coming from Tasmania, you would like to hear it. I thought you'd be interested in hearing all of these things about Tasmania. Helping more people in regional Australia into home ownership.
Minister McCarthy, please resume your seat. Senator McGrath, I have almost any time a minister's been on their feet today, I've had to call you to order. Obviously, you're keen to make a contribution. Please find that opportunity outside of question time. Equally, Senator Duniam. Minister McCarthy, please continue.
He's the worst. He's the worst.
And, Senator Duniam, you know, we've opened 4 Medicare urgent care clinics in Tasmania.
Senator Duniam,
he did interrupt, he did interject, and I figured, being a Tasmanian senator, you'd love to hear those things.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thanks for inviting local government back then. The Tasmanian Freight Equalisation Scheme review team was supposed to visit Flinders Island in September, but the trip was cancelled and the Mayor hasn't heard anything since. No one's called either the King Island or Flinders mayors to explain what's happening with the review that was promised. Why isn't— well, that's come from Rachel and Marcus. So why hasn't anyone bothered to call them?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister McCarthy.
Senator Tyrrell, I will certainly take that on notice for you, if you like, and certainly reach out to those mayors in Tasmania and let them know that we have heard their call through you, but they will be hearing from our government.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Tasmanian Freight Equalisation Scheme is a major issue for Tasmania, especially for King and Flinders Islands. It's why the cost of living is so high on those islands, and it's why the mayors advocated so passionately for a review. Does this broken promise and lack of communication show how little Labor cares about fixing the Tasmanian Freight Equalisation Scheme?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. Well, could I just certainly correct the senator on that? That is not the case in terms of the Albanese Labor government. We are here in terms of supporting our local governments across the country, and I have said to Senator Tyrrell that I will take that question on notice, and I certainly do reject outright that we are not helping in this instance, Senator Tyrrell, and I will come back to you on those questions.
Senator Ruston, order. Senator Lambie, first up. Senator Lambie.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Industry and Science, Minister Farrell. The Whyalla Steelworks is one of 2 steelworks left in Australia, which makes the troubles it's facing as part of the GFG alliance not just local, they're national. Both the South Australian Federal Government have uttered possibilities of supporting an electric arc furnace upgrade for the facility so it can be a modern green steel manufacturing facility. But progress seems to be obstructed by the financial woes of the steelworks owner, Mr Gupta. What are the government's plans to move the steelworks and the town beyond the unfulfilled promises of Mr Gupta and the Groundhog Day they are trapped in?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Lambie, for that question about the great town of Whyalla.
Not wiped out.
No, never got wiped out.
Never did.
You might be interested, Senator Lambie. My family, parts of my family moved from Blora in the mid-north to Whyalla in the 1960s. Which generation? And
order.
And I regularly go back to the town to meet my cousins who still live up there. In fact, I was driving back from my vineyard. Just outside of Auburn, in South Australia. Listen to this. And what did I see? I saw a massive billboard of Senator Lambie with Senator Rex Patrick. Now, can I say this, Senator Lambie?
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator McGrath.
A point of order on relevance. I'm reluctant to interrupt the minister's reminiscences of his recent holiday, but I don't think the minister's being anything relevant close to answering Senator Lambie's question.
Thank you, Senator McGrath, and I will draw the minister back to the question. Minister.
Now, can I say this, Senator Lambie? The state government and the terrific state government in South Australia and the federal government will do a damn sight more than any other group in this parliament to ensure.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Lambie.
I'm sorry, Madam President, but I don't need a golden book here. What I want to know is what does the government plan to move the steelworks in town beyond the unfulfilled promises? What do you have up your sleeve to help them?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. That you reference the state and federal governments, which the minister was referring to. I have directed him back to the question, but he was being relevant to your question. I'll continue to listen. Thank you, Minister.
The state and the federal government will work together to ensure that those fine workers, those members of the Australian Workers Union who work in the steel mill up there, continue to provide Australia with the best quality steel in this country, and we'll continue to support this town, these workers. And I'd hate to think, Senator Lambie, that
thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. It's great to see they're all about the green energy over here. On the 25th of September, South Australian Premier Peter Malinauskas told Parliament, and I quote, "We have the magnetite, we have the renewable energy, we have a steelworks and we have a port. If we bring those things together, we can produce green iron, which apparently you guys want to do." So it seems what's missing is the will. Minister, are the Commonwealth and South Australian governments working together to retain this sovereign capability?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Thank Senator Lambie for her first supplementary question. Well, just from the statement that you read out from that very fine Premier Malinauskas, I would have thought it was transparent. Look, I don't want to. They're already attacking me for my reminiscences. I won't answer that. Already.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. We're now halfway through, and all I want to know is, are the Commonwealth Australian governments working together to retain this sovereign capability?
Senator Lambie, stop. When you stand, you need to tell me why you're standing. I presume you're on a point of order. I'll remind the minister of your question. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Look, we have a deep interest as a federal government, and as you've just read out, a deep interest as a state Labor government, ensuring that these fantastic workers who go in there every day to that steel mill — I'm not sure if you've been up there to have a look at it, Senator Lambie, but it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to see that steel being pumped out of that steel mill. You can
thank you, Minister. The time for
that
answering has expired. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. The government has sent billions of dollars overseas to assist foreign shipbuilding capabilities. What about local industry? Will the government guarantee the people of Whyalla that, no matter what happens, the steelworks is part of Australia's manufacturing future and that will be transformed into the modern green steel manufacturing facility required for our industrial future?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Lambie for her second supplementary question. I'd hate to think, Senator Lambie, that you'd be seeking to exploit the problems of the Gupta Company in Whyalla for some political advantage, either for your new party running in South Australia or for Mr Rex Patrick. But can I reiterate? Can I reiterate that this federal government, alongside that terrific state government led by Mr Malinauskas, Premier Malinauskas, can do two things. We can ensure that steel is continued to be made in Australia, and we can build ships in Osborne in South Australia with technology and with agreements with the United States and the United Kingdom. We can
thank you, Minister. The time
country.
for answering has expired. Senator Darmanin.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Communications, Senator McAllister. Parents I'm hearing from are all too aware about the rising cost of social media on the mental health and oftentimes physical health of our young people. What harms are young people facing online, and how will the Albanese Labor government's online safety bill help to better protect them from these harms?
Thank you, Senator Darmanin. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. And Senator, I am not surprised that you are hearing concerns from parents, because more than half of Australian parents and carers say that social media is their number one issue of concern. Now, I know that there are some members of the opposition who go out of their way to avoid listening to experts. Not all, but some, and I would encourage them just to make an exception and listen to the research on this. A recent Australian study found Australian girls who use social media more than 2 hours a day were particularly at risk of depression and reduced well-being. It replicates what we are seeing overseas. A pre-COVID study in England found that using social media more than 3 times a day was a strong predictor for poor mental health and well-being in 13 to 16-year-olds. A longitudinal study of more than 6,000 young Americans found that using social media more than 3 hours a day doubled the risk for those not listening, of 12 to 15-year-olds experiencing negative mental health outcomes like symptoms of depression and anxiety. Parents know that social media can be a tool for connection, and nobody wants to disrupt that. But it does also pose risks. It poses risks and threats, particularly for young people. And unlike the Greens, unlike quite a few, it seems, on the opposition benches, this government thinks that it's time to face up to that challenge.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Dahnemann, first supplementary.
In June, Mr Dutton committed a Liberal and Nationals government to introduce an age limit, telling News Corp the time for relying on social media companies to enforce age limits was over. Mr Dutton said, and I quote, "They don't do it, they never have, and we have no faith in them to do so in the future." Today, we have seen members of the Liberals and Nationals break ranks and argue publicly that the passage of this crucial bill should be delayed. Why is it important for the parents and young people of Australia that this bill is supported by the Parliament?
The time for asking has expired. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. Well, as I said, I do understand that there are some members of the opposition who don't care what experts have to say, but they could listen. They might want to listen to the Leader of the Opposition himself. So just 2 weeks ago, Mr Dutton wrote on a Facebook post, "Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook and Snapchat are having a serious impact on children's development, their mental health and behaviour. Many parents are setting limits, but it is clear that more needs to be done." Mr Dutton goes on to say this in comments to the Courier Mail. He says they're putting profit ahead of people, and I think it has to be addressed. I don't know any parents who have a different view. These companies have zero regard for consumers. They're the tobacco companies of the 1970s and the 1980s. Well, they're strong words, aren't they? They are strong words, but they are apparently not enough for the coalition backbench.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Dahnemann. Senator Watt. Senator Dahnemann, second supplementary.
Fairfax Papers reported this morning that doubts about the social media bill have expanded from Senators Canavan and Antic to more mainstream coalition MPs, setting up the meeting as a test of the opposition leader's authority. Why is it so important that this bill be supported, and why is it that only Labor can be trusted to deliver stable government in the best interests of Australian families?
Thank you, Senator Dahnemann. Senator McAllister. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. Well, Senator, curiously enough, the social media ban is actually just one of a handful of policies that the Leader of the Opposition has actually announced. He doesn't have very many, but this is one of them, and it would be surprising if he backed away from it. And just 2 weeks ago, he wrote on Facebook, "This legislation must be passed by Christmas to give parents the support that they need." But you are quite right, Senator Dahnemann. It is being reported that the Coalition Party Room is seeking to test his authority on this. And the concern, of course, is this, that wouldn't be the first time that Mr Dutton backflipped on a commitment that he had made. Right now, as we speak, he is blocking a bill to curb student visa numbers, and Australians can be forgiven for asking the question, if he's reckless enough to play politics on immigration, what else is it that he will not play politics with?
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash.
Thank you. And my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Today, The Guardian newspaper reported that the Attorney-General, Mark Dreyfus, pressured the independent National Security Legislation Monitor, Mr Jake Blight, to clarify a so-called ambiguity in a report handed down by his predecessor. Mr Blight then made the clarification. To be clear, the so-called ambiguity was a direct criticism of the Attorney-General. Mr Blight has confirmed that the Attorney-General's office and even the Attorney-General himself raised this so-called ambiguity with him. Does the Prime Minister think it is acceptable for the Attorney-General of Australia to pressure an independent statutory appointment to censor criticism of a government minister?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
Senator, through you, President, Senator, I don't agree with your assertions about what Mr Dreyfus did, and I think that the report speaks for itself. But I'm asked, what a minister, particularly the Attorney-General, should do, and I'd say to you, Senator, well, ministers shouldn't be tipping off the media or have their office tip off the media before
Senator
police
Cash.
raids.
Senator Cash.
Ministers certainly shouldn't be having their office tip off the media before police raids, and ministers, people who seek to be ministers, also ought not be making comments about sensitive consular issues in a reckless and irresponsible way. So, Senator.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Cash, I've called you 3 times and you simply ignored me. You are being disrespectful and disorderly. You've asked your question. Equally, Senator Watt, the interjections across the chamber are also disorderly. Minister Wong, please continue.
Thank you. The decision to clarify the annual report was an independent decision, and the INSLM, the Independent National Security Legislation Monitor, was not subject to any direction from the government. I would make the point. That the issues in relation to the report, I would say to you, Senator, I think reflect less than well on past holders of the Attorney-General's position.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash, first supplementary.
Thank you. And again, the National Security Legislation Monitor, Mr Jack Blight, has confirmed that the Attorney-General's office and even the Attorney-General himself raised the so-called ambiguity with him. How are the Attorney-General's actions in pressuring an independent statutory officer consistent with the Ministerial Code of Conduct?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
Well, Senator, they are your words. They are your words. And, well, Senator,
Cash,
I'm answering
the question.
They are your...
Senator Cash, I did call you to order. You've asked your question. I expect that you will listen in silence. Minister Wong.
I would say to you, through you, President, to the chamber, do not, again, fall for Senator Cash making unfounded statements in this place. Those words, I do not believe, are an accurate reflection of what has occurred. I would also make the point that this matter in part deals with disclosure obligations to the court by the First Law Officer of Australia. I would make the point that despite an obligation to do so, the then government, your government, did not disclose the report known as the Corner Report to earlier proceedings. Mr Dreyfus took action as he needed to remedy that position.
Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Thank you. And again, to be clear, the so-called ambiguity being referred to was a direct criticism of the Attorney-General himself. And again, Mr Blight has confirmed that the Attorney-General's office and even the Attorney-General himself raised this so-called ambiguity with him. Has the Attorney-General compromised the independence of the Independent National Security Legislation Monitor with his actions?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
Absolutely not.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator Ciccone.
Thanks very much, President, and Merry Christmas, everyone. My question is to the Minister, my good friend, the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. Now, we know that tradies... He's a good mate. Now, in fact, everyone here is a good mate. We know that tradies, President, we know that tradies, warehouse workers, retail assistants, truckies and miners are essential to the Australian economy. Now, for a very long time, many of these workers in these fine industries have been on labour hire contracts. and have been paid significantly less than their direct employees, often despite doing the same work, on the same rosters and even wearing the same uniforms. Now, Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government helping Australian workers earn more and keep more of what they earn, and how are the government's policies delivering a fair go for Australian workers?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you to my good friend Senator Ciccone. It's a great question on the issues that matter to all Australians, being their wages. Well, all year in Parliament we've focused on the #1 issue facing Australians, being cost of living, and helping lift wages is a crucial part of that. The Albanese Labor government is deliberately trying to lift wages and create more jobs to help Australians deal with cost of living pressures. Workers in factories, warehouses, construction sites and on the shop floor are doing it tough right now, which is why this government is committed to improving their wages after 10 years of the Liberals deliberately keeping wages low. And one of the changes we've made to help working people is closing the labour hire loophole to make sure labour hire workers get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. That is something the opposition continually opposed, both when they were in government and now in opposition. And I'm pleased to say that Metcash labour hire workers are the latest Australian workers to get the pay rise they deserve. At a warehouse operated by Metcash in South Australia, labour hire workers were required to attend the same meetings as direct employees, undertake the same training as direct employees, they worked the same rosters as direct employees and did the same duties as direct employees, but despite all of that, they were being paid up to $15,000 less per year than direct Metcash employees, and that all was allowed under the Coalition's laws. But as of yesterday, because Labor closed the loophole, the one you voted against, because Labor closed the loophole that allowed those workers to be underpaid, those labour hire workers will now be earning the same as direct employees. And workers like Tiles, who said, quote, "For 6 months I've been doing the same job as workers who were directly employed by Metcash, but I haven't been paid the same. This decision means that for the first time I'll be paid fairly for the work I do." Under Labor, workers will earn more and keep more of what they earn. Under the Liberals, they'll work longer for less.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thanks a lot, President. And I know many of our fine meat workers, flight attendants and miners, many who will be working very hard in the lead up to Christmas, should not be paid less just because they're employed as labour hire. I do note that the opposition leader believes that paying Australian workers fairly would, and I quote, undoubtedly damage the Australian economy. So how has the Albanese government's same job, same pay laws, Minister, help Australian workers get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work?
Thank you, Senator. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Ciccone. Well, paying workers who do the same work is not only fair, but it also delivers safer, more productive workplaces for everyone, and that includes ensuring that labour hire workers get paid the same as the direct employees they work alongside. In my home state of Queensland, meat workers are now seeing an extra 25% in their pay packets because of Labor's same job, same pay laws. And one labour hire worker, Lance, was doing the same job as his workmate, doing the same roster and wearing the same uniform as him, but was earning $500 a week less than him just because he was labour hire. Because of Labor's changes, they will now be paid the same. But all this is at risk from Mr Dutton and the Coalition and their reckless policies. And when Senator Hume, here she goes again, was asked if the Coalition will scrap same job, same pay on insiders in September, she said, "We will certainly have to consider it." And we know when the Coalition considers workplace laws, it is never to help workers earn more.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Ciccone, second supplementary.
Thanks a lot again, President. Now, the Liberals and the Nationals have proudly said that those on the Coalition side of the chamber will always stand with the employers of Australia. They've also promised to take a suite of targeted repeals of workers' pay conditions to the next election.
Order.
Now, Minister, what is the government doing to put more money in the pockets of Australian workers and their families, and what are the key barriers to achieving this?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Ciccone. It is disturbing that when Australians are dealing with cost of living pressures, Mr Dutton is so reckless when it comes to workplace laws. Laws that have meant Australians are now earning more to deal with the very cost of living pressures that they're facing. And the inconvenient truth for Mr Dutton is that he and the Coalition have voted against every single Labor measure to lift wages and improve the condition of workers. Not once, not twice, but 48 times in this parliament they have voted against Labor's measures to increase wages and conditions. In fact, when we were passing the labour hire laws, Senator Cash, in a Sky News interview, described them as, quote, the most radical shake-up of Australia's industrial relations system in decades, and Labor is making a bad situation worse, and that these changes were an attack on the labour hire industry. So rather than support workers struggling to pay their bills, the coalition, quote, will always stand on the side of employers in Australia,
Thank you,
even when
Minister.
they're
The
underpaying
time
their
for
workers.
answering has expired. Minister Wong.
On that note, I ask that further questions be placed on notice.
Oh, there you go.